August 27th, 1979, Warren, Minnesota. It was a routine patrol for Deputy Val Johnson. But at 2:19 a.m., his life would suddenly change.
He sees a light off in the distance on an adjacent road, blacktop highway, two-laner, and figures that it may be a small aircraft with a landing light coming in to make an emergency landing. So he turns down that road to see if he can render assistance.
Almost instantaneously, that light went right from like a mile and a half away to right in his face. And he ended up crashing the car.
After the crash, police dispatch receives a call for help.
407, what's the problem? I don't know. Something just hit my car. I don't know how to explain it. Strange.
One of the law enforcement officers who saw the damage firsthand was Marshall County Sheriff Herb Morstead. Sheriff Morstead, a deputy at the time, vividly recalls the night of the encounter with the actual car from the event.
And Val Johnson was still in the car. He was dazed and seemed kind of confused, didn't know for sure what had happened to him. And there was considerable damage to the car that was documented at that time.
He was driving a Ford LTD, and you don't damage an LTD with some little trivial thing. There was quite an impact.
The physical damage to the car baffles the investigators on the scene.
To look down, first damage was done to the headlight of the car. It's busted. It's in the original condition it was from that night. The interesting thing is you can see by looking at the headlight, there's no deer hair or debris or anything in there that would explain how the damage was done. And then as you move up on the car onto the hood, there's a round dent in the hood. And further up on the windshield is busted and cracked quite severely. Again, there's no evidence of any rocks or debris or anything that would have broke this windshield. And further on in the car, up on the roof, there's one of the lenses from the warning lights is busted. And behind that are the two antennas that were damaged. The interesting part on these antennas was right where the antenna bends, there were bugs attached to that antenna, which would indicate that nobody could have physically or used a tool to bend that antenna because they would have had to disturb those bugs.
The effects of Deputy Johnson's alleged UFO encounter go beyond the damage to his police cruiser.
Later on, the investigation continued. Val Johnson was found to have had what they call welder's burn to his eyes, supposedly from the light that he had encountered. One of the other things that was curious is the watch on his wrist and the car clock both stopped for 14 minutes.
That's kind of an interesting piece of evidence. For what most people don't know, though, a lot of cops will synchronize their watches with dispatch, the car clock, and then their private timepiece, so that all three were operating at the same time, so that in the course of your night, you made notations in reference to a case that it would be as accurate as possible.
I wish I knew what happened during the 14 minutes that these two timepieces were affected. But there is, again, a lot of room for speculation, scientific speculation, of what happens when a person is involved in something like this.
Deputy Johnson's squad car has been put on display at the Marshall County Historical Society Museum. Phillips has traveled more than 1,000 miles exclusively for this History Channel program in order to see the damage firsthand. Phillips arrives in Warren, Minnesota, and receives a personal guided tour of the squad car by Sheriff Morstead.
I've looked at photos of this so many times, it's like I've actually seen it. And that's incredible.
Phillips is then startled by a new piece of evidence given by the sheriff.
The windshield has probably got the most damage. It's damage that was caused by a force pushing that windshield in and then back out again.
Really?
Yeah.
So this actually has flexed in and back out, as though there was sort of a suction?
Something like that.
Pulled it out.
Yep.
I mean, that's incredible.
For more than 3 hours, Phillips and Sheriff Morstead survey the car and discuss the case. Phillips also learns that current law enforcement officers have no doubt about Johnson's story.
Well, I believe Officer Johnson, when he was working as a deputy, I believe he was honest that night. He told the facts.
Al Johnson was a good, honest man, a good deputy sheriff, and I have no reason not to believe him.
When an officer comes forward with a story of an encounter, he or she risks everything. Their career, their personal life, maybe their marriage, their family. They're putting it all on the line.
Phillips has now reopened his investigation into the Minnesota encounter in hopes of finding out what really happened in the early morning hours of August 27th, 1979. Many researchers believe that this trace case, along with thousands of others, will eventually lead us to the truth about UFOs.